Gita, 12th chapter. 12th chapter is famously known as Bhakti Yoga. Now, before we begin this chapter, let me remind you that when we started talking about 7th chapter of Gita, we had mentioned that starting 7th chapter to 12th chapter, Gita focuses on devotion. Devotion aspect of spiritual practices, sadhana. So, if you might remember how we have been discussing the both impersonal and personal aspect of God, and how we have been talking how devotees look at God, and in that there is more of bhakti. In the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th chapter, etc., there was more of a knowledge aspect, and starting 13th, 14th, these two, knowledge and devotion, will be synthesized. Now, we have been discussing 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th in such detail that 12th chapter doesn't require much of detailing, because it is more of summing of the ideas which continued from 7th to 11th. So, since we have already discussed things, we are not going to repeat it. Just in short, bhakti. Bhakti essentially means when you adore someone, when you deify someone, when you love someone. Now, that's bhakti. Now, when someone loves God and does rituals so that he or she may feel connected with God, this is also known as bhakti. And later on, because there is a systematic practice of that, the term became Bhakti Yoga. Now, bhakti is an aspect of Vedanta. But later sages like Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, they broke away from the mainstream of Vedanta, and instead of calling themselves Bhakti schools of Vedanta, they started calling themselves simply Bhakti schools. And when they started calling themselves Bhakti school, so we find three major persons like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, and much later Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who made a formal system out of bhakti. And then to distinguish between the different stages of devotion, they came up with different terms. So initially they would say that it's ritualistic worship, and the technical term for that was Vaidhi Bhakti. Vidhi means rituals, Vaidhi Bhakti. And from there, as the person becomes more and more indrawn and becomes more and more enters more and more into God, the term became Ragatmika Bhakti. Ragatmika means, Rag means love, attachment, Ragatmika Bhakti. And in the third stage, it was known as Prem, love. So, when we talk normally, under normal conditions, we say that Prem, that is love, is for anyone or some object, and Bhakti is towards God. But when you go into Bhakti literature, these become technical terms. Bhakti is the beginning stage and love is the last stage. Here in this 12th chapter, Bhakti in its both aspects will be discussed, both as ritualistic aspect or mechanical aspect, and also in its deep love aspect. And here, 12th chapter, this being one of the earlier works on Bhakti Vedanta, the distinction between Bhakti and Prem is not made, although that distinction comes in later Bhakti literature. So now, we find that although starting 7th to 11th, we termed it Bhakti Yoga, but if you try to classify it further, you'll find that starting 2nd chapter to 10th chapter, the impersonal aspect of God has been discussed, much more than the personal aspect. And when it comes to 11th chapter, it's purely the personal aspect, where it was Vishwarup Darshan, which we concluded. We had 4 talks on that. So now, Arjuna is slightly confused. He says, "Oh Lord, you have been talking to me about impersonal aspect of God, starting 2nd chapter to 10th chapter. And in the 11th chapter, you have been talking about the personal aspect." There are these 2 famous aspects in Hindu literature, not only in Hindu literature, all over the world, where they talk about impersonal and personal. Impersonal is where you talk only about the qualities of God. Personal aspect is where you talk about form also. Actually, there is no difference between formless God and God with form. There is no difference. But because of some of these Semitic religions, these things they confuse God with form with idol worship. Idol worship and worshipping God with form, they are not the same thing. We have discussed this idea many times, so we are not going to repeat it. Anyone who worships formless God, he also worships God with form. And Sri Ramakrishna used to repeatedly talk about this, that God without form is same as God with form. There is no difference as such. It's only people with limited intellect, limited religious understanding who confuse between these 2. Anyway, so now Arjuna asks, "Evam satata yukta ye bhaktastvam paryupasate ye chapyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittama." So it's a very natural question for Arjuna, that you have been discussing about God with form, God without form. And in the last chapter, you suddenly bring up the topic of God with form. So persons who worship, they are of different types. There are people who worship the formless, and there are people who worship God with form. Of these, whom would you say is superior? For example, these days, this Islam, it goes on attacking everybody, telling that they are idolaters or they are their enemies. Now when it comes to Hinduism, they say that we are idolaters. That means they consider that people who worship God with form are inferior people. Now, people who are attacking and most of these people, they don't have the understanding of what to say of Hindu religion, of religion itself. Here, the issue is not even that. Arjuna admits that, both are aspirants of very high level, of high quality. But of these 2, who are the superior? So that once you know who is superior, you will take up that path. So Lord Sri Krishna says that, no, it's nothing like that. Maya Veshya Manoye Mang Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Paryopetas Teme Yukta Tamamata. Look, Arjuna, first understand that anyone who puts his mind, his being, his soul entirely in me, he is the superior devotee. Instead of discussing the impersonal God and personal God, the Lord says that anyone whose personality and whose being, whose existence is totally immersed in me, he is the superior most devotee. And it doesn't say devotee, it says that yogi. He is the person. Like devotees are also yogis. So who is the superior class of yogi? One whose mind, being, personality, everything is totally immersed in God. And now, from there, the question comes, does it mean that a person who is thinking of God all the time and thinking of God in the sense of God with form, he's superior? He says, no, it's not that. Ye to aksharam anirdeshyam avyaktam paryupasate sarvatra gamachintyam cha kutastam achalam dhruvam And this verse is connected with Sanyemendriya Gramang Sarvatra Samabuddhaya Te Prapnuvanti Mameva Sarvabhuta Hiterata. Verse number 3 and verse number 4, these two are joined. That means discussion begins in verse number 3 and continues up to verse number 4. Now, what verse number 3 essentially discusses is what we have discussed in chapters like chapter number 2. To remind you, the ideas that we are slowly coming across now, these ideas have been discussed in earlier chapters, sometimes in brief, sometimes in slightly expanded form. So we are not going to repeat those things. We will just give the meaning of those things. Says, person who worships impersonal God, one who cannot be pointed at because God is not a being. One who is unmanifest in the sense he cannot be grasped by the senses. And sarvatra gamachintyam cha. He pervades everything. And he cannot be grasped even by the mind. Because God is infinite. The only definition about God is infinite. Our senses, our mind, they can grasp only the finite. So our mind and our senses cannot grasp God. It's just not possible. And because it's not possible, the only way to define God is that He is Akshara, He is Avyakta, He is Achintya. Achintya means one about whom you cannot imagine, who cannot be grasped by the mind. And Avyakta means one who is unmanifest, who cannot be grasped by the senses. And Akshara, it is imperishable, it never perishes. It continues to be what it is. And Paryupasate, one who does upasana, one who meditates, one who worships this kind of supreme reality. Now, upasana here, we will just mention what exactly upasana is. Because every religion depends strictly on upasana. Upasana means spiritual practices. The technical term for spiritual practices in Sanskrit is upasana. What is upasana? Now, upasana, the word can be broken in such a way that it means sitting near. It is something like Upanishad, sitting near. So, how do you sit near? You sit near something, some idea, some person, some deity, something, and your entire focus is on that. It's not just sitting there. You sit there and your focus is on that. For example, supposing here we have Sri Ramakrishna temple at Belur Math. You go to Sri Ramakrishna's temple and you sit in front of the Vigraha, the marble idol of Sri Ramakrishna. And you're sitting there and your entire being is focused on Sri Ramakrishna. So now you're physically sitting near him, and more importantly, mentally you are sitting near him. And if you continue doing it for a long time, then it becomes upasana. So the first condition of upasana is to sit near an object or an ideal. How? Says your intellect has to be first refined by the words of the scriptures, because upasana is more of a technical term. When a boy loves a girl, keeps on chasing her, that is not upasana. You can say that he's so devoted. Now, when we say devoted, there is a technical connotation about it. But when it comes to upasana, the worship, real worship, sometimes you'll find novelists telling that, even Charles Dickens says, I worship the land she walks. Now, the worship, you can use worship there, but worship is a technical term which, when used in spirituality and religion, has to be explained accordingly. Spiritual practices, upasana, the first condition is that you must have read scriptures properly under a trained teacher. And thinking on that, you must make your mind one pointed and absolutely clear. Because generally what happens, our mind has too many ideas and we are totally confused about it. We are not focused about things. Mind has to be chiseled according to the words of the scriptures. That's a very, very important thing. And then, once the idea becomes very clear, then you take your mind near it, because you have been cleansing your mind for a long time based on the words of the scriptures. To give you an example, supposing there is a Christian person, he is really a devoted Christian. So what he does is he reads Bible, he listens to sermons, he reads the commentaries, and slowly he cleanses his mind and realizes that Jesus is God. You say that why? Every Christian child knows that. No. That knowing is not important, because once you have cleansed your mind with the dross that the mind contains, then your mind becomes pure. And then you realize what it means to be God and what it means to be Jesus the God. And then you sit near that for how long? For an indefinite period, till you actually realize in person that Jesus is God. This is upasana. So there are 3-4 things involved in it. First is knowing the scriptures well. Number 2, molding your mind according to the words of the scriptures. This is a very, very, very important thing. So you will find these upstarts, religious upstarts, the terrorists and all those persons. They might have read Quran, they might have read Bible, they might have read Gita, but they have not really contemplated upon the true meaning of that. Once you contemplate on that, after that what you do is, you start cleansing your mind of the garbage that it contains. And once that garbage is clean, now you sit near that ideal, so that you can realize that ideal. So supposing some religion says that God alone is true. So you go on thinking on that, what exactly it means. Once your idea becomes clear, then it is then that you drop everything and you go sit near that ideal. Not physically, mentally. That means you are continuously thinking only of that. And when your mind has focused on that for a very long time, your mind becomes steady about that thought. And once your mind becomes steady about that thought, under no condition it wavers, then it is known as upasana. And when you have done upasana for a very long time, only then you get this spiritual realization as a consequence of that. So if an upasana doesn't lead to spiritual realization, there is something wrong with upasana. And unless upasana is understood in proper context, upasana cannot even be performed, or to speak of getting results. So he says, Sanyam, well, this is about upasana. Then comes the next verse, verse number 4, where it says how it is done. Sanyamendriya gramang sarvatra samabuddhaya te prapno vanti mameva sarvabhuta hite rata. How do you know a person is spiritual? What is the test of spirituality? Gita 12th chapter, verse number 4, beautifully explains who is spiritual person. If you go on killing people in the name of religion, that doesn't really make you religious. That doesn't make you spiritual. It says, first condition it says, you have to control your senses, all your senses. Your 5 senses, 5 inner senses and 5 external senses. Organs of action and organs of perception. As also the mind has to be controlled. Unless Sanyam Indriya Gramam, Indriya Gram, in the entire village of the senses, there are in total 11 senses. 5 organs of action, 5 organs of perception, and the mind. They have to be controlled. Sarvatra samabuddhaya. You have to have the same mentality towards everyone. This idea will come repeatedly. So you cannot say that you are different and I am superior. Those of you who might have read my book, Carving a Sky, they will see that we are discussing about inclusiveness. We are mentioning inclusiveness. This is Sarvatra Samabuddha. You have to be equal towards all. You cannot say that people of my religion are my own and everyone else is to be killed. No, that's not religion. Not according to Hinduism and definitely not according to Gita. And te prapnuvanti mameva. They alone reach God. Who are sarvabhuta hite rata. Those who are engaged in the well-being of everyone. Sarvabhuta hite rata. See, so there are 3 conditions laid down here. First is, your senses must be under total control. So, violence, jealousy, anger, all these things, they have no place in the life and personality of a truly religious person. And there should not be any distinction between mine and thine. Sarvatra Samabuddha. Your mind has to be equal towards everyone. And finally, Sarva Bhuta Hide Rata. You have to engage yourself towards the well-being of everyone. Well-being, not the way you want, but well-being the way they need it, they want it. For example, you see Swami Vivekananda, while in the West, he said, people ask for bread and we give them stones. That means the world is hungry and you are teaching them spirituality. Say, I don't believe in a God who cannot give me bread here and will give me eternal heaven after my death. Now somebody is suffering, somebody is hungry, and you say that, don't worry. You hold on to this religion and you will go to eternal heaven. No, that's not the kind of well-being I want. The well-being means, well, this is my requirement and this is a requirement of everybody else. It's not that I want it exclusively for myself. We are all hungry and we want our hunger to be appeased. Do something about it. So when you are doing good, for example, you catch hold of a goat and you kill it. And you say that, okay, see, you sacrifice yourself and your sacrifice will take you to heaven. No, that's not doing good to the goat. Some religious persons say that if you die in my hands, you will go to the heaven. And so I am killing you. In your interest, I am killing you. No, we do not want that kind of doing good to me. This has to be understood even by me. For example, there is a surgeon. The surgeon takes up a scalpel and he does operation on me. He is using a knife. But we don't feel threatened by him. We know that whatever he is doing good for me. He is doing in my interest. When a teacher scolds a student, the student knows and the student's parents know and the society knows that teacher is doing it in the interest of that boy, of that student. But when you go and kill somebody telling that I am sending you to the heaven, are you really doing good to that person? No, you are not. You think you are doing good. Everybody else thinks that what you are doing is wrong. The one test of goodness is that it has to be universally accepted as good. And one has to do that in public, not in private. See, when the terrorists kill, they are always killing from behind. They are behind the screen. They say that, well, I am into guerrilla warfare and all those utter nonsense. If you are really true to your dharma, if you really think it's right, you come out in open and fight it. No, they will not. They will kill the helpless. They will kill those who cannot even defend themselves. Gita doesn't permit this kind of doing good to the others. So, see, most preachers, they make this mistake. Most preachers, they try to do good to the society the way they understand that to be good. But no, if you really want to do good to the society, you have to do good the way they want it. So, the ultimate taste for religion are 3. Your senses must be under control. You must not have any kind of discrimination in your mind. Everyone should be equal in your eyes. And lastly, you should be engaged in the welfare activities of everyone without any distinction. It's not that you are doing good at the cost of others. No, not that. When you can fulfill these three conditions, only then you are a religious person. So, the Lord says that worshippers of the impersonal God, as mentioned here, says in the third verse, Ye tu aksharam anirdeshyam avyaktam paryupada. There is the term kutastha. Kutastha means God. Kut is the name for Prakriti. Kut means, actually it means heap, and it also means one who is clever, shrewd. So Prakriti is shrewd. It appears as one, but actually it is more than one. And it makes one appear as many. That's why it is Kut. Kut is wicked. Wicked in the sense of clever, shrewd. Lord is beyond that. Lord is the master of that. And Lord is sitting on the top of it. So, Kutastha. So he says, but this is very difficult to attain, this kind of spiritual realization. Klesho dikataras tesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkam deha vadvi ravapyate. People in general are so attached to their bodies that it is not possible for them to go on thinking of the impersonal God. There is a very interesting thing that once we had one laborer here. He was a Muslim laborer, and he was telling me, he's totally illiterate. He was telling me that, Hindu religion is all false, and even the Vedas, they say that there should not be idol worship. So I started laughing. I said, look, brother, have I really fallen to that plight that I have to learn about religion from a person like you? You, who have no religious sense, one who is completely illiterate, one who doesn't even know his religion, what to say of my religion. Have we really fallen to that plight? See, this is the problem. Some preacher somewhere has told that Hindus are wrong because they are idol worshippers. We are not idol worshippers. Forget idol worshippers. They say that persons who worship God with form, they will go to hell. Why we will go to hell? Simply because someone got a brainwave and is telling like that. And even an illiterate person who has absolutely no religious sense, is spiritually challenged, is morally challenged, is materially challenged, he comes and tells me, he comes and challenges me. Look at you. You are a challenged person. You have nothing in this world. And you have just put a stamp on yourself that you belong to so-and-so religion. All over the world, the same problem is going on. No, that is not the way religion runs. You just think that those who are worshippers of impersonal religion, they are the great. Why? Because they have done maximum killing. Now, if that were the condition, no, that's not the way you judge a religion. Now, says that persons, they are anyone who is attached to his body, who has body consciousness, he cannot do the sadhana, upasana for impersonal God. Klesho diktaras tesham avyakta sakta chetsam. A person who has body sense, he can never do sadhana for the impersonal God. That itself rules out most religions of the world, because these persons, they are so obsessed with their bodies, they are so obsessed with their material comfort, and they talk about impersonal God. Ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matpara ananye naiva yogena mang dhyayanta upasate. Verse number 6 says, one who worships me with total commitment, and all his work are offered at me. He doesn't take anything for himself. He is totally devoted to me, totally dedicated to me. He has given up everything in this world. Tesam ham samuddarta mrityu sangsar sagarat bhavami nachirat partha maya veshita chetsam. I take hold of such persons and take them out of this ocean of birth and death. We are born, we die, we think it's all over, but no, nothing is over, because we will be born again. So this is an ocean which you can never transcend. See, the way Lord says, Jesus in Bible, I am the light of the world. He who followeth me shall never walk in darkness. Just like that, Lord Krishna told centuries before Jesus, Tesham ham samuddarta. I am the savior of such persons from Mrityu Sangsar Sagarat, from the ocean of birth and death. Whom? The earlier verse number 6, Yetu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matpara. One who has given everything for me, whose life is devoted to me, one whose life is dedicated to me. So how it is done? He says, Mayyeva man adatsva Mai buddhing niveshaya nivasisyasi mayyeva ata urdvam na sangshaya Arjunam. One who has dedicated and devoted his mind, his intellect, everything to me, know that verily he lives in me. Who lives in me? One who has dedicated his mind, intellect, senses, everything to me. It's obvious, no? Like you might have seen the world. When you love someone, when you love somebody, when you love some object, you're totally obsessed about it. Then you know that somewhere you have become one with it. A person who is obsessed with God, now obsession is not really a very good word, but that conveys the idea that your mind, your organs, your senses, everything is totally absorbed in God. Says that person invariably gets me. Now, this does not happen in case of material thing because that's not your nature. If you are obsessed about gold, if you are obsessed about wealth, it's not that you will become one with wealth. But if you are totally absorbed about God, you will become one with God because that's your nature. Material things are not your nature. I am not this pain. So even if I keep on thinking of this pain, I am not going to become this pain. But I am one with God, and hence if I keep on thinking of God, everything else will drop away from me. Now how to do this upasana? Because initially it began with, you have to do spiritual practices. How do you do spiritual practices? Atha chittam samadhatum na shaknosi mai stiram abhyasa yogena tato mami chaptum dhananjaya. These are pretty simple verses, and earlier also we have explained this. It says, if you cannot really devote yourself entirely to me, samadhatu means to put something entirely into something. So if you are not able to do that, then take help of abhyasa yoga, the yoga of practice. The yoga of practice means do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And you keep on doing it till you succeed. That means, as they say, never say die. Don't give up. Keep struggling. If you succeed at one go, if you can put your mind in God at one go, very good. If you cannot, keep on struggling, keep on struggling, keep on struggling till you succeed. Abhyasepya samarthosi mat karma paramo bhava madartham api karmani kurvan siddhim avapsasi. Then the next option comes that, okay, fine, if you are not able to do this repeated practice of meditation, you want to meditate and you are not able to meditate, then what you should do is, you take help of external work. And whatever you do with the idea of service to God. So when you are studying, you say that I am reading it as service to God. I am writing as service to God. I am walking, I am circumambulating God. When I am sleeping, when I am thinking of God. Whatever I am doing, it is service of God. Do this. Abhyasepya samarthosi. If you are not able to do the practice, the yoga of practice, then keep on doing everything for me. Every act of yours, the breath that you take, the eyelids that you make, everything has to be dedicated towards God. Think that whatever you are doing, it is a service to God. And says, if you are not able to reach even that stage, then atayta tapya shaktosi kartum madhyogam ashrita sarva karma phalatyagam tadha kuru yatatmavan. Now, if you are not able to maintain that mentality, then do one thing. Go to the Lord's temple, or mentally you say that whatever I might have done, the results of these actions, fruit of this action, hereby I offer to the Lord. If you keep on telling it mentally, twice daily, thrice daily, with time you will slowly realize that the outcome of some action that you have done will not affect you. See, the problem is that Gita is talking about giving up everything for God. And you are not able to give up everything for God. He says, okay, try it again. No, you are not able to do it. Okay, then you do one thing. You think that whatever you are doing, it is offered to God. You are not able to do even that. Then you said, okay, ultimately it is the results of action that bind you. So, you just keep telling mentally that whatever good or bad I have done is now offered to God. The results, good or bad, here goes to the Lord. Once you start saying it, slowly, you will realize that your mind has started expanding. And you will see that you will not really be affected by the results of action. It actually happens. And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of monks. I have interacted with them, I have seen. With time, initially when they start working, they think of job satisfaction, work satisfaction, success, this, that. But with time, that attitude goes away. They do not become passive. They still work. Whatever work is given to them, they do. They don't worry about the success or failure of that. And from there, now you are slowly going up. After that, whatever you do with the idea that this is my service to the Lord. And from there, your mind becomes totally immersed in God. So, starting verse number 8, it went step lower. And when you do upasana, when you do sadhana, you go just the opposite way. You start with offering the results of action. From there, you dedicate the work itself. And from there, slowly, you dedicate your mind totally to God. And then it says, comparison is Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat jnanat dhyanam vishishyate dhyanat karma phala tyagat shanti ranantaram. What happens is that quite often people keep on practicing spirituality without really understanding things. They don't apply their mind. It is far better to have understanding of spiritual practices than to go on doing meaningless, ritualistic spiritual practices. So some religion preaches that, okay, you pray 3 times, 2 times, 5 times a day, and you go on doing it mechanically. That's a very stupid thing. I mean, stupid thing in the sense that it's far better to do that than doing nothing. But a better thing is to have a thorough understanding of these things. And better than this is one who meditates with a clear understanding of what is spirituality and a clear understanding of what is God. And best of all is to give up the fruits of action, because there is a renunciation involved. Spirituality means renunciation. Spirituality means to give up. Nothing like giving up. Spirituality is all about giving up. It says that you may meditate, you may worship, you may do anything, but if you can give up the fruits of action, nothing like that. You have taken the high road to spirituality if you can practice that. Acharya Shankara says that here, this is some kind of patting being done, because earlier Lord says that if your mind can remain immersed in God, then you attain to God. And if you cannot do that, slowly there is a step down, and finally it says that if you can't do anything, then you do karma phala tyaga. renounce the fruits of action, results of action. Acharya Shankara says that there being a similarity between giving up, like giving up everything for God, has some similarity with giving up the results of action. There is that giving up is common. For example, we say that Einstein was a scholar, and a boy who goes to a school, we say he is a scholar. Earlier in India, there was a term called merit scholar, and the government of India used to provide for the education of these merit scholars. So anyone who goes to school or college can be called a scholar. And Einstein is also a scholar, and there are great scholars. So because these people are dedicated to learning, they are known as scholar. And we know that there is a huge difference between a real scholar and somebody who is going to a school. And more or less, this ends the discussion on how bhakti is attained, and now talks about the real qualities of a saintly person. One who has dedicated oneself to God, one who has dedicated oneself to spirituality. What kind of person he becomes? Starting verse number 13, this is discussed. It's a very simple thing. Adveshta sarvabhutana maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankara sama dukha sukha kshami. A person who doesn't have any inimical thought towards anyone, this is known as adveshta. He doesn't have any hard feelings, any wrong feelings towards anyone. Maitra, he is friendly towards all. Karuna, he is compassionate towards all. And nirmamo, he has no identification for himself. Nirahankara, he has no sense of ego. He doesn't have any sense of pride. And his mind remains calm whether good follows or bad follows. Whether he is happy, whether there are happy circumstances or unhappy circumstances, his mind never gets perturbed. And kshami, he forgives everybody. Basically, we are discussing gentlemanly qualities, but based on spirituality. See, when the goal is to attain God, and with that oneness in mind, when you practice values, these are known as spiritual qualities. Those very things, when practiced by the society, we call them simply values and virtues. Santushta satatam yogi yatatma dridha nishchaya mayarpita mano buddhir yo mad bhakta same priya. Arjuna has initially asked, who is a superior yogi? Now the Lord is explaining who is favorite of God. No, Jews say that they are favorite of God, and Christians say they are favorite of God, and Muslims say they are favorite of God, and we also say we are favorite of God. Who is really favorite of God? Says, Santushtaha Satatam. A person who is ever content. Ever content. He is never dissatisfied. Under no condition is dissatisfied. Neither in birth, nor in death, nor in happiness, nor in unhappiness. He is never discontented. Yatatma is continuously, his mind is in God. Dridha nishchaya, whatever he determines, he carries on with that. And most importantly, Mayarpita Manor Buddhi. His mind, his intellect, his entire thinking process is dedicated to me. Such a devotee is dear to me. When we take some sweets for offering to some temple, we take fruits and we take flowers and we pray. Do we make God happy? No, we do not. To make God truly happy, to make myself dear to God, these conditions must be fulfilled, as told by the Lord himself in Gita. Ever content. I must be ever content. There should not be any dissatisfaction, any discontent in my mind ever. And I should always be a struggling aspirant. I am always struggling towards spirituality. I am of firm resolve. In the morning I say something, and in the noon I say something else. In the afternoon I say something else. No, not that. You have to be of firm resolve. I say this and I'll do this. And Mayarpita Manobuddhi, my mind, my intellect, it has to be totally dedicated towards God. Only then I can be dear to God. And number 15 verse, this is a very beautiful verse, says, Yasman no dujate loko, loka no dujate chayah, harsha marsha bhayod vegair mukto ya sachame priya. Who is a great devotee? Who is dear to me? One who is not perturbed by the world and who does not perturb the world. See what happens? There are people who become so unpopular, they are so demanding, and they are so troublesome that if they go visit someone, the hosts get terrified. Oh my God, that person is coming. Like there was Durvasa Muni, says Durvasa. Wherever he would go, even if he was treated well, if there was slightest mistake, he would curse them. So people were terrified of him. You will see that even persons like us, there are people who are not comfortable with us. We go and they become uncomfortable. When you think of Islamic terrorists, you get terrified. The moment you think of it, you get terrified. What kind of man of God you are? A spiritual person is man of God. A man of God means yasman no dujate loko, lokan no dujate chaya. These people, a truly man of God, will never be perturbed by the world, nor will the world be perturbed by the presence of such a person. A saint means that. How do you define a saint? The way Gita says, a saint, no one feels disturbed by his presence, and he is also not disturbed by the presence of anyone in the world. Harsha marsha bhayodvega, he neither becomes happy nor he gets disturbed by anything. These are the people who are dear to me, the Lord says. Verse number 16, the Lord continues, Anapeksha shuchir daksha, udasino gatavyatha, sarvaramba parityagi, yo madbhakta samepriya. Lord says, who is dear to me? He continues with the discussion. Anapeksha. It doesn't expect anything. He expects nothing from the world. He expects nothing from life. He expects nothing from death. People who are morbid, they want to die. Because they expect that death will bring them happiness. A true devotee of God, he doesn't have any expectation from life, any expectation from death. He doesn't have any expectation from his body. He doesn't have any expectation from his senses and from his mind. Nothing. He's anapeksha. Shuchi is absolutely always clean. Clean in body and clean in mind. Tip top all the time. Daksha. Daksha means expert. There is an expertise about that person. And Acharya Shankar beautifully defines expertise as expertise in work. As and when a person has too many work landing on his table, he knows which ones to do first and which ones to do later. Normally we get confused. When work comes, we say, oh, I am so busy, I've got so much work. Gita says, no, my devotee is always an expert in work. How? He knows or she knows what to do first and what to do later. This organizing work, see, normally we think that a devotee is an otherworldly person who doesn't understand the world, who is careless. No. It's the other way around. A person who is a true devotee of God, he is so perfect in his work that people will learn from him. He doesn't get confused. He's so perfect in work. And Udasino is indifferent. He actually doesn't want anything for himself. Gatavyatha. Nothing can cause pain to him. No, nothing. Sarvaramba parityagi. He himself doesn't take any undertaking. That means he doesn't start something new. Something comes to him as a way of duty, as a way of work, he performs. But he is not always planning, oh, I have to do this, I have to write a book, and I have to give this lecture, I must plan this. He is not into planning and all. Because his mind is always immersed in God and nothing other than God. Such a person is dear to God. This idea is repeated in verse number 17. Yona rishyati na dvesti, na shochati, na kankshati, shubha shubha parityagi, bhakti manya, samye priya. The idea is same, that a person, he neither feels happy about anything, nor does he hate anything, and he doesn't worry about anything, nor he craves anything, and he gives up everything that's good, everything that's bad. It's not that he gives up only the bad, he gives up good also. And then what does he do? He remains immersed only in the thought of God. A child, he remains absorbed in the thought of his mom. A baby doesn't want anything or anybody other than his mom. Just like that, a devotee wants nothing other than God. Sama shatrocha mitreja tatha manap manayo shitosna sukha dukkhesu sama sanga vivarjita. Lord continues with that. The attitude of a devotee towards his friend and towards his detractor is all same. Not that a devotee has any detractor. I mean, persons is not inimical towards anyone, but there might be people who are inimical towards such a devotee. Says they don't distinguish. They are loving, they are kind towards all. Whether you are a friend or you are an enemy, enemy according to your mentality, not according to my mentality. You think that I am a wrong person. But a sage never considers anyone wrong. Tatha manap manayo. Whether you praise him, you insult him, he doesn't care. He is indifferent. He is absolutely indifferent. Shitosna sukha dukkhesu. Neither heat, nor cold, nor happiness, nor misery. He is always detached. Detachment is spirituality. Is detachment. Detachment is spirituality. Further conditions of a devotee, that means spiritual person is described in verse number 19. Tulya ninda sutir moni santusto yena kenachit aniketa sthirmatir bhaktiman me priyo nara. Actually, this verse describes the real nature of a monk, of a sannyasi. It says, Tulya ninda stutir moni. If someone criticizes him, he is not bothered. Someone praises him, he is not bothered. And he is mauni. Mauni basically means silent, but actually it means one who has controlled his speech. He doesn't go on talking unnecessarily to anyone, everyone. Santustaha, ever content. As you can see, the idea is being repeated. So, yena kenichit, whatever he gets, he is happy with that. He doesn't crave anything. The little that he gets, the more that he gets, is ever content. Aniketaha, he is free. He doesn't stay at any one place. He's totally free. Now, Guru Nanak, when he had his spiritual realization, he suddenly realized that, spirituality is everything. And for next 10, 12 years, he just kept on wandering, and there is no place, starting from Sri Lanka to Arabia, where he didn't go. And in those days, even in those days, imagine 400-500 years ago, he went to areas like Leh, Ladakh and all. It's amazing. To the Himalayas he went, to the ocean he went, and he was totally free. Aniketa, no home for himself. Sthiramati, his mind is fixed. Always fixed. It's not wavering. His mind is not like that of a monkey. Bhaktiman me priyo nara. It is this kind of devotee who are dear to me. Yeto dharbyamritamidam yatoktam pariupasate shraddadhana matparma bhaktaste tiva me priya. So it says, this is the last verse, this concludes the chapter. A sannyasi, a monk, or a devotee who is full of these values, in whom these values percolate totally, one is totally into all this. When you put a sweet of Bengal, you take a rasgulla and you find that everywhere it is that syrupy, that sweet syrup permeating that whole cheese ball, dripping with sweetness. These values, when they're so full in a saint that those values are dripping from him. So know that ye to dharmya amritamidam yatoktam paryupashate shaddadhana mat parma bhaktastev me priyaha. Says that persons who have these values, and persons who are into the practice of these values with great devotion, not unwillingly, these are the people who are my devotees. They are dedicated to me, they are devoted to me, and hence they are dear to me. Earlier in the 7th chapter, the Lord says, Jnani tu atmai me matam. Person who has realized God, one who is Jnani, he is my soul. We had explained there how the soul of a person is dear to him. Now Jnani and the devotees are not different from Jnani. Jnani and devotees, they are same. They being same, they are the soul of God. And they being soul of God, they are dear to God. Who is dear to God? God's soul is dear to God. And a devotee and a Jnani, he is the soul of God. Now how do you say that this person is a devotee or this person is a Jnani? It's the last 7 verses, starting verse number 13. The qualities that have been described, a person who is full of these qualities, they are the true Jnani, they are the true devotees, and they alone are dear to God. Once you have these traits in you, you cannot say who is superior and who is inferior. The question of calling that the person who worships formless God is superior or inferior, or person who worships God with form is superior or inferior, this question does not arise. It's a meaningless question. So there are lots of questions in spirituality which are actually meaningless. Once a person's mind is totally immersed in God, whether it be formless God or God with form, his own being is lost forever. So there is no question of there being any superior or being inferior. They are the soul of God. To be the soul of God, what you have to do is, the qualities that have been described here, you have to imbibe, you have to practice, and these qualities have to be full inside you the way juice is full inside rasgullas. And this is what it means to be a true devotee. So we completed this chapter pretty quick. Of course, this chapter was simple because we had already discussed these issues starting chapter 7. So here we end, and the next day we begin with chapter number 13, which is a very complicated chapter.